Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. Blackhearted son of Black, and again asking you to hit that share button. The message is more important than the messenger, and that's why I do that, although I do still thank those who've hit like or subscribe. I'm currently at 1209, I believe. I really do appreciate that. More importantly, though, other views. And apparently, people have been hitting the share buttons so that the views get out there, and that's what's important. In part one of why Kobe and Brandy didn't work out, I gave insider information as to the evidence I had. And I'm going to clarify this first before any critics get started. I did not give this insider information in order to merely take a dig at an old enemy. And if I did, so goddamn what, he deserves it. But I didn't. And one of the reasons you can tell is, or one of the ways you can tell I didn't do it for that purpose is that I never gave his name. And I don't like him. As for my hatred, I hate the community in my city that validated him. My hatred lies there. That's not something I will ever forgive the community for. The black community of my home city has done more than this. They betrayed my parents when my parents were fighting for black awareness and black consciousness. They've irritated and cut into precious family time because my mother was willing to raise her voice on behalf of our people, but many took advantage and decided that that meant that she had no life of her own. People try to, and as a matter of fact, even the NOI, the local chapter of my home city, they'll probably try to kill me if I said this and I named my city. But the local chapter of the NOI even attempted to get my mother in trouble at a job, not directly at first, but then indirectly. They tried at first. They tried to do something that would have gotten my mother in trouble. But when she stated what she was allowed to do and what she was not allowed to do, because the radio station was in fact owned by her boss, then they decided to go in on her. And that's one of the reasons why I would listen to their preachers sometimes in other cities, but I would not ever join even before I understood the difference between them, fully understood the difference between them and the rest of the Muslim world. But it wasn't really about Brandy, and it wasn't really about my childhood enemy either. What it was about is the pattern. This was merely one example of a nationwide pattern. And this pattern also exists in Canada, I'm sure. It exists as well in the UK. I'm aware of this. I'm sure to a certain extent it exists down a yard in Jamaica. I'm sure that it also exists to a certain extent in southern Nigeria. The pattern is the issue. When, and gentlemen, I want you to understand this. I'm addressing you. I want you to realize that you may, in fact, not have any game. It's possibility. You may, in fact, be a wimp or a lame, especially when you're young, because no boy becomes a fully grown man overnight. And no boy becomes a tough guy overnight, even as a teenager. That's not the way that works. So you may have to go through a phase in which you refer to as such before you're even fully an adult, physically or mentally. But let's start with physically. These are possibilities, but understand that you were never forgiven for it. And that's where the difference comes in. You are treated poorly for this sort of thing, going back as far as when you're a kid. You see, you come up in these good and bad neighborhoods alike. Most of you are not the negative stereotype that your enemies have of you. And by your enemies, you know who I'm talking about. Because you are not that negative stereotype, you are relegated as though you were the bottom 1%. You are treated the same as not even Carlton Banks, but Steve Urkel. You are treated the same as the stereotypical incel that sits in the basement and plays video games and survives off of snacks and stinks and has no hygiene. If you say for 1 second that you are confined to a dating market, let alone a marriage market, in which you have to be a certain type of person, and that type is also your enemy's negative stereotype of you, whether you voice that part or not. And anybody, man or woman, tells you to shut up and tries to correct you just for observing that, and you have practiced hygiene, and you're not in your parents' basement playing video games all day and wasting your life, and you are eating a normal and healthy diet. You're not fitting the stereotypes, the opposite stereotype of the lame. Then you're being gaslighted. That's it. I'm sorry, gaslit. That's what's being done to you. Rashida Strober is upset as an adult. As an adult, she is still upset because of the colorism she experienced towards the end of childhood, in childhood and to its end. She has the right to be upset about it if she controls it. She has the right to be upset about it so that it doesn't consume her. But you'll notice that she is very militant against colorism, even in adulthood. I'm not going to knock her for it. She is aggressive to a certain extent, but you know what? Like, let's be honest. She was met with aggression when she was younger. This happened. She will say, you're not going to sit up and tell me colorism doesn't exist. That's gaslighting. You can't gaslight me. She's not going to give you that. And I don't blame her for one bit. She's going to tell you, you ain't gaslighting me for a second. You ain't going to tell me it doesn't exist. I lived it. The confusion comes when adults are looking at what's going on right now and realizing that no, colorism is not a thing in the adult lives. They're not thinking back to childhood. She's counting childhood along with adulthood. And this is where the disconnect comes in. You likewise, you must understand that when you were talking about certain things, a lot of these things, there's a difference. A lot of these things began in your teenage years. However, you have one even stronger leg to stand on, and that is that it does not stop in adulthood. It never does. Whether it's the reverse colorism that you face if you're a noticeably light-skinned man, or if it is merely the classism, the dysgenic mating preference of the Wicked Witch of the West. Be she white or black, she's Western. Whichever one it is. If, in other words, if you just ain't dark enough for any attractive black woman in your region of the country, or let's say you're just not thugged out enough for any of the Western women that are attractive to look at, you actually have a stronger leg to stand on than hers, because see, what you face does not stop when you grow into adulthood. Even in adulthood, the alpha male in the white community is marked by tattoos and motorcycles. Even in adulthood, in the black community, he's marked by felonies, gold teeth, tats, pistols. The white man's negative stereotypes of what black men are like. She chooses that. And even if Brandy did not look specifically for a gangbanger, and she, to our knowledge, she's never looked specifically for something like that. The fact is that it was one of the most immoral characters in the black sector of my hometown that appealed to her to where she was willing to forego the fact that he didn't have her type of money, bring this dude to spend the weekend with her, and buy this dude a bunch of clothes. Now, let's not get it twisted in what I said. I know this guy because we all know someone like this dude. He would not spend a weekend with any woman, Brandy or any other woman, if they're not related or he's not digging them guts out. Absolutely not. He does not do that. If he did, he would never admit it. He would vehemently deny doing anything like this. I spent a weekend with her and we didn't have sex. No, you didn't. Mm-mm. Why, is she related to you? If she was on her period, he's the kind of a guy that would say, well, why don't you call me next weekend then? That's who he is. That's how he is. Now, I'm very sure that he would still be that kind of guy. But this is the pattern everywhere. You can go to her hometown, you would see the same thing. You can go to your hometown, you will see the same thing. And this is why there is SYSBM. See, you don't have to be Steve Urkel. You simply just have to not be like these cats. It's not always the thug. No, this guy, he was no thug. Nobody would ever call him a thug. That's not something anybody would ever say about this guy that I had it out with in his driveway. He was not a thug. Definitely not. He was, in fact, middle class growing up. But the neighborhood was quite nice. 4 houses away from him, not in a straight line, but 4 actual plots of land away from him was a almost $1 million home. Yeah, that's real. No joke. This guy here, he didn't spend time in bad neighborhoods even during his free time. He didn't even go into bad areas trying to hang out with his boys, you know? No, that's not what happened. One of his partners, this nigga was too old to be hanging out with the guy that I had it out with. I mean, he was too old, but his nickname is Tootie. I'm not going to give you his real name anyway. But Tootie, I think he was from one of the bad neighborhoods. He didn't hang out in his own neighborhood. He came to our neighborhood to hang out with the guy I had it out with, and to hang out with another guy in between their 2 ages who also had been a bully growing up. That's just that's what he was. There was nothing hard about any of these cats. Nothing at all. Yet and still the one I had it out with was chosen by the women because of his entertainment value. And we've seen even that, not just that, because see, there were other guys that could play basketball really well and they could dance, and they weren't chosen. They weren't given the same opportunities as this guy by the same women. What it came down to at the end was that he was also, morally speaking, a piece of crap. That's what it was. He always pushed boundaries and disrespected people as long as he was not physically afraid of them. Always. And consequently, they wanted him. And they were willing to take what little bit they could get from him. He may very well have children he doesn't know about. I kind of doubt it, but that's probably something that should have happened. The issue and why I'm recording all of this and why I recorded it last is because the issue is that the pattern in our areas is always the same. And this is why it is that there are the reactions that there are. And so your job is to be very cognizant of them and to remember a lot of them at one time, not because you're going to have to explain this to the standard holders per se, but because you're going to have to merely tell the younger men. You're going to have to explain to their sons why there are these reactions and why they should join in. And I think you get the point. I think I've explained it well now at this point. So this is the blackest man in the world signing black out. Assalamu alaikum.